Don't get in the car. The voice was a low, urgent command, not a shout, but it sliced through the sterile quiet of the executive parking garage with the precision of a scalpel. It stopped Eleanor Vance with her hand on the polished chrome handle of her obsidian Maybach. She froze, not from fear, but from sheer, unadulterated annoyance. No one gave her commands. "Excuse me." Her voice was colder than the concrete floor, aimed at the source of the interruption. A man in a gray janitor's uniform stepped out from behind a support pillar. He was tall, with a lean, wiry strength that the ill-fitting jumpsuit couldn't completely hide. He held a push broom like a sentinel's staff. His eyes, dark and intelligent, were fixed not on her, but on the rear passenger side tire of her vehicle. "I said, don't get in the car," he repeated, his voice level, devoid of the deference she expected from staff. Not yet. Eleanor's day had been a cascading series of disasters. A hostile quarterly review, a data breach in the Singapore office, and a thinly veiled threat from Arthur Sterling on the board about shareholder confidence. The last thing she needed was to be accosted by the night shift cleaning crew. "I am the CEO of this company," she stated, each word a perfectly polished stone of authority. "And I am getting in my car. Now, if you'll step aside." He didn't move. He gestured with his chin toward the tire. "Just look. Please." The please was what registered. It wasn't pleading. It was a simple, factual request, as if he were asking her to observe a law of physics. Against her better judgment, a flicker of something, not curiosity, but a need to disprove his audacity, made her walk the few steps to the rear of the car. Her security chief, a burly man named Harris who was currently holding the door for her, tensed. "Sir, step away from Ms. Vance," Harris rumbled, his hand instinctively going to his hip. The janitor ignored him, his focus unwavering on the tire. "Look at the valve stem. The cap." Eleanor leaned closer, her expensive heels clicking softly. The valve stem cap was there, a small black plastic nub. It looked perfectly normal. She straightened up, her patience evaporating completely. "It's a valve stem cap. Are we done with this theater?" "It's not yours," the man said. "Yours are chrome. Factory standard. That one's a cheap plastic replacement. And it's a millimeter longer than it should be." A cold stillness settled over the garage. Harris stopped moving. Eleanor stared at the man. How could he possibly know what kind of valve stem caps came standard on her car? She had never noticed them herself. She looked back at the cap. It was just a piece of plastic. Insignificant. But he'd spoken with such certainty. "What are you implying?" Harris asked, his voice now sharp with professional concern. "I'm not implying anything," the janitor said, finally meeting Eleanor's gaze. His eyes held a weary depth that seemed utterly out of place with his uniform. "I'm stating a fact. That cap is not original to this vehicle. Given your position, Ms. Vance, I wouldn't want to find out what's inside it." Eleanor's mind, a machine built for data analysis and risk assessment, began to spin. The data breach, Sterling's threat, the unusual confidence of this man. It was a pattern of anomalies, and she had built her empire by never ignoring an anomaly. "Harris," she said, her tone clipped and all business. "Get the bomb squad, and get a full diagnostic on the car's network. Don't touch that cap." Harris, his face now pale, nodded and pulled out his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Eleanor turned her full attention back to the janitor, who had retreated slightly, leaning his broom against the pillar. He looked as if he wanted nothing more than to melt back into the shadows. "Who are you?" He looked down at the name stitched on his uniform. "Marcus. I'm with Custodial Services." "No," she said, taking a step toward him. The air between them crackled. "That's your job. That's not who you are. Who are you to know the factory specifications of a Maybach's valve stem caps?" He hesitated, a flicker of something she couldn't name. Regret, maybe, or deep-seated pain, crossing his features. It was a brief, intrusive flash, there and gone. "I used to notice details. It was my job." The bomb squad arrived with a quiet, terrifying efficiency. They evacuated the garage level, their movements precise and economical. Eleanor watched from the security of the elevator bank, with Marcus standing a respectful 10 feet away, looking for all the world like a man who wished he were anywhere else. A small, remote-controlled robot approached the car, its mechanical arm extending a delicate pincher. Carefully twisted the plastic cap. There was no explosion, no grand drama. The cap came off and was placed in a containment box. A technician in a heavy blast suit examined it with a scanner. After a moment, he gave a thumbs up and spoke into his radio. Harris came over to Eleanor, his expression grim. It was a GPS tracker, military grade, with a microphone. It was broadcasting your location and recording everything said inside the vehicle for the last 12 hours. Since this morning, since her meeting with Sterling, the information settled into her with a chilling weight. Someone wasn't just trying to get information. They were mapping her life. This wasn't corporate espionage. It was predation. Her gaze snapped to Marcus. He was watching the bomb squad pack up. His shoulders slumped slightly, the posture of a man resuming a heavy, invisible burden. He had saved her, not just from being tracked, but from the ignorance of her own vulnerability. This janitor, this man named Marcus, had seen a detail that her entire high-priced security team had missed. The mystery of the bug was terrifying, but the mystery of the man who found it was, in that moment, far more compelling. She walked over to him, her steps echoing in the now empty garage. "My office," she said. It wasn't a request. "Top floor. Now." He didn't look at her. He just nodded slowly, his knuckles white where he gripped the handle of his broom. "My shift ends in an hour." "Your shift just ended," Eleanor corrected him. "You have a new one now." The elevator ride to the penthouse was a study in silent, suffocating contrast. Eleanor Vance stood in the center of the glass-walled cabin, a figure of sharp angles and expensive fabric, her reflection a cool, impassive ghost against the glittering cityscape of downtown. She was the queen in her vertical kingdom, ascending to her throne. Marcus stood in the corner, his gray uniform seeming to absorb the light, making him a shadow in her periphery. He kept his eyes on the floor, on his worn work boots, as if the panoramic view of the city he helped keep clean was a language he no longer wished to speak. Eleanor didn't speak. She observed. His hands were clean but calloused, the knuckles slightly enlarged. They were not the soft hands of a man who had spent his life behind a desk, nor the grease-stained hands of a mechanic. They were the hands of someone who worked, but with a precision that suggested more than mopping floors. His posture, even in his attempt to be invisible, was economical. No wasted movements. He was a man who had pared himself down to the essentials, a self-imposed exile in plain sight. The elevator doors opened directly into her office, a vast expanse of minimalist design. A single, massive desk of polished obsidian stood before a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a god's-eye view of the metropolis. There were no pictures, no personal effects. It was less an office and more a command center, a sterile environment where data was king and emotion was a fatal liability. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to one of the two severe leather chairs opposite her desk. Marcus moved to the chair but remained standing. "I'd prefer not to, ma'am. My clothes." "I'm not concerned with your clothes." She cut him off, her voice sharp. "I'm concerned with the fact that you identified a military-grade surveillance device by its plastic cap." "Sit down." He sat, the expensive leather side under his weight. He looked profoundly uncomfortable, a man caught in a world he had deliberately abandoned. Eleanor circled her desk and settled into her own chair, the throne of power from which she ran Ethel Corporation. She folded her hands on the cool, dark surface and pinned him with her gaze. "Personnel file says your name is Marcus Thorne. You've been with Ethel for 2 years. Custodial services, night shift. Before that, 5 years of unverifiable references. A string of odd jobs. Warehouse work, short order cook. No education past high school listed. No digital footprint to speak of. You barely exist." He met her gaze without flinching. "That's the idea." "Why?" A muscle feathered in his jaw. I like my privacy. Privacy is for people who don't have something to hide, Eleanor countered, leaning forward. You have something to hide, Mr. Thorne. World-class forensic accountants have something to hide when they're pushing a broom in my garage. Don't they, Marcus Vance? The name hit him like a physical blow. He didn't gasp or flinch, but a deep stillness came over him, the stillness of a cornered animal. The name on his file, Thorne, was a flimsy shield. The name she'd just spoken was his real one, a ghost she had somehow resurrected. How? His voice was a rasp. I am the CEO of a technology company that holds 382 patents on data mining algorithms. Your face, your biometrics were scanned the day you were hired. It took my security team 30 minutes to run it against every database we have access to, public and private. Marcus Vance, lead forensic investigator for the Department of Justice's White-Collar Crime Division. You testified in the Argent Petrochemicals case. You unraveled the Luxembourg Shell Corporation scheme. Your conviction rate was 97%. Then, 7 years ago, you fell off the face of the earth. You vanished. Why? He looked away from her, his gaze drawn to the vast window and the city lights that twinkled like fallen stars. When he spoke, his voice was hollowed out. My wife was killed. The statement was stark, brutal. It hung in the sterile air of the office, an unwelcome intrusion of raw, human grief. Eleanor felt an uncharacteristic flicker of something. Not pity. Empathy was an inefficient emotion. It was an acknowledgement of a variable she hadn't considered. The official report said it was a car accident, she said, her voice softening by a fraction of a degree. A drunk driver. He turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw the full, crushing weight of the trauma he carried. It was in the lines around his eyes, in the profound exhaustion that seemed to emanate from his very bones. The man I put away in the Argent case, Richard Sterling, had a brother. Arthur Sterling. Arthur Sterling, her CFO, the man who had threatened her just this morning. The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. He was never formally implicated, Marcus said, his voice flat, reciting a history he had clearly replayed 1,000,000 times. There was no proof, but the driver was a known associate of his. The case was closed. I resigned. I had a daughter to raise, a little girl who had just lost her mother. My work, it brings a certain kind of attention. I couldn't have that in her life. So I disappeared. I became someone else. Someone no one would ever look at twice. Someone who pushes a broom. An invisible man. He had built a fortress of obscurity to protect his child. And tonight, he had risked it all because he noticed a piece of plastic that was 1 millimeter too long. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, processing. The threat wasn't just corporate. It was personal, rooted in a vendetta that was years old. And Marcus Vance was standing at its epicenter. I am in a precarious position, Mr. Vance, she said finally, her tone shifting back to business. My company is on the verge of a merger that will make us the largest data security firm on the planet. I believe someone on my board is trying to sabotage it. Someone is leaking proprietary information. And now someone is tracking my every move. I believe that someone is Arthur Sterling. Then you have a problem, Marcus said, his face a mask of resignation. No, Eleanor corrected him. We have a problem. He knows who you are. He must. Placing that tracker was a message, not just for me, but for you. A way of telling you he hasn't forgotten. That he can still reach you. That he can reach your daughter. The mention of his daughter made him visibly recoil. The mask slipped, revealing the terrified father beneath. Maya, you leave her out of this. I can't. He already brought her into it, Eleanor said, her voice firm. But I can help you protect her. I can offer you resources you can't possibly have. Security, a safe house, complete anonymity when this is over. In exchange, I need you to do what you do best. I need you to find the proof. I need you to unravel Arthur Sterling from the inside of my company. I need the man who took down Argent Petrochemicals. She stood up and walked to a polished chrome panel on the wall. It slid open with a hiss, revealing a secure terminal. She tapped the screen, and a holographic display of complex financial data shimmered in the air between them. "This is a test," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "A sample of our quarterly logistics budget from last year. My internal auditors cleared it. They found nothing. But I know something's wrong. A discrepancy of less than 0.01%. But it's there. A ghost in the machine. Find it." She gestured to the terminal. "You have 1 hour. If you find it, you work for me. We take down Sterling together. If you don't, you can go back to your broom, and we'll both have to hope for the best." Marcus looked from the glowing numbers to Eleanor's implacable face. He was being pulled back into the world that had taken everything from him. A world of secrets, lies, and dangerous men. But she was right. Sterling hadn't forgotten him. And this time, hiding wouldn't be enough to keep his daughter safe. He had to fight. He rose from the chair and walked to the terminal, his shoulders straightening, the janitor receding and the investigator emerging. His fingers, hesitant at first, began to move across the holographic interface. The weary resignation in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of the old fire, the fire of the hunt. "I don't need an hour," Marcus Vance said, his eyes already tracing the intricate patterns of data flowing through the air. "I just need the truth." The silence in Eleanor's office was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the building's climate control and the whisper of Marcus's fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Eleanor returned to her desk, not to work, but to watch him. She had expected him to be methodical, slow, perhaps even rusty after 7 years. She was wrong. He moved through the data streams with an intuitive grace that was mesmerizing. He wasn't just reading numbers, he was seeing a story. His eyes, narrowed in concentration, followed invisible threads that her own team of highly paid analysts had missed. He wasn't using a search algorithm. He was a living one, his mind processing petabytes of information with a fluency that was both brilliant and unsettling. He pulled up shipping manifests from their Asian distribution centers, cross-referencing them with fuel expenditure reports from their European logistics fleet. He layered procurement invoices over maintenance schedules. It was like watching a grandmaster play a dozen games of chess simultaneously. Eleanor felt a grudging, unfamiliar respect. She had built her company on the belief that data was pure, that the human element was a chaotic variable to be minimized. But watching Marcus, she saw the flaw in her logic. Data was a language and he was a native speaker. Her auditors knew the grammar, but he understood the poetry, the subtle nuances, the lies hidden in the syntax. 28 minutes into the hour, he stopped. He stood perfectly still for a moment, his head tilted as if listening to a distant sound. Then he straightened up and turned to face her. "Found it," he said. Eleanor raised a skeptical eyebrow. "That's not possible. My team spent a week on that dataset." "Your team was looking for a rounding error," Marcus explained, his voice calm and certain. "They were looking for a thief who was trying to be clever. Sterling isn't clever. He's arrogant. He hides things in plain sight." He gestured to the display. "He didn't fake a single number. He invented a whole new supply chain. Project Chimera. It doesn't exist. There are no facilities, no trucks, no personnel. But it has a budget. A very real one. He's been routing micropayments from dozens of different cost centers into Chimera's accounts. Each payment is small enough to fly under any standard audit threshold. Pennies on the dollar from fuel overages, bulk purchase discounts he doesn't report, returns he writes off as losses. It's death by 1,000 cuts." He manipulated the display, and a single line of code glowed a faint red. "And this is how he does it. A recursive algorithm embedded in the accounting software. It triggers at the end of every fiscal quarter, consolidates the fractional amounts, transfers them to a holding account, and then erases its own pathway. It's elegant. And it's been siphoning off roughly $2 million a quarter for the last 3 years. $24 million. Stolen from under her nose. The fury that rose in Eleanor was cold and sharp, but it was overshadowed by the sheer brilliance of the man standing before her. "That's not all," Marcus said, his expression turning grim. He pointed to a different section of the data. You asked me to find the discrepancy in last year's logistics budget. That was it. But I also looked at this year's. The test data you gave me was a closed loop. This is live. He brought up a new screen. The payments into Project Chimera stopped 3 months ago. All of them. Why would he stop? Eleanor asked, her mind racing. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if he's planning something bigger, Marcus countered. He's not just stealing anymore. He's covering his tracks. And he's freeing up capital for a single, large-scale transaction. The timing coincides with your merger negotiations with OmniGuard. The pieces fell into place. Sterling wasn't just sabotaging the merger. He was planning to use Ethel's own money to buy a controlling interest in the newly formed company through a proxy, effectively stealing it right out from under her. The tracker on her car wasn't just about surveillance. It was about knowing her movements to anticipate her response when he made his move. Eleanor stood up, the cold fury now solidified into icy resolve. You've passed the test, Mr. Vance. Welcome to Ethel Corporation. Your official title will be Special Projects Consultant, reporting directly to me. Your salary is $500,000 a year, effective immediately. Marcus looked taken aback. I don't want your money. I'm not asking you what you want, she said flatly. I'm telling you what you are worth, and you are worth far more than that. But we have to maintain appearances. To everyone else, you're still Marcus Thorne, the night janitor. You'll continue your shifts. Your real work will be done here. She walked to another seamless panel in the wall. It slid open to reveal a small, Spartan room. Inside was a single desk, a chair, and a high-end, air-gap terminal completely disconnected from the Ethel network. It was a digital clean room. This will be your office, she said. No one enters but you and me. From here you will dig. You will find me every transaction, every shell corporation, every secret account tied to Arthur Sterling. I don't just want the gun. I want the fingerprints, the bullet, and the name of the man who sold it to him. I want irrefutable proof to destroy him. Marcus looked into the small, windowless room. It was another kind of exile, a gilded cage instead of a basement closet. He thought of his daughter, Maya. He pictured her small face, her bright, innocent smile. This was the only way to keep her safe. To walk back into the fire he had fled 7 years ago. There are conditions, he said, his voice firm. Eleanor turned, surprised by his audacity. Name them. My daughter, Maya. She is to be protected. Full-time, plainclothes security. The best you have. They are not to approach her or let her know they are there. They are ghosts. But if anyone so much as looks at her the wrong way, they will be there. That is not negotiable. Done, Eleanor said without hesitation. I'll have a team from a private firm I trust in place by sunrise. They will be invisible. Second, he continued, I need access, unfettered, to everything. Server logs, personnel files, internal communications. No firewalls, no locked doors. If I'm going to find him, I can't be fighting your security protocols at the same time. This gave Eleanor pause. It was an unprecedented level of access, a complete violation of her own carefully constructed security hierarchies. It was an act of absolute trust in a man she had met only hours ago. She looked at him, at the quiet determination in his eyes, the unwavering integrity that had compelled him to risk his own safety for a stranger in a parking garage. She had always trusted data. For the first time, she was going to have to trust a person. Granted, she said, you'll have my credentials. As far as the system is concerned, you are me. And third, Marcus said, his voice dropping slightly, when this is over, you will use your resources to make sure Maya and I can disappear again. For good. New identities, a new life, somewhere quiet, somewhere no one knows the name Marcus Vance. This was the one that stung. She was just beginning to recognize the asset she had in front of her, and he was already planning his exit. But she understood. He wasn't doing this for her or for the company or for the money. He was doing it for his daughter. It was a transaction, pure and simple, an exchange of his unique skill for his child's safety. Agreed, Eleanor said. extending a hand. "We have a deal." Marcus looked at her hand for a moment before taking it. His grip was firm, dry, and brief. It was not the handshake of a new employee, but the sealing of a pact. A reluctant, dangerous alliance forged in the sterile silence of a penthouse office, high above a sleeping city. As he stepped into his new, windowless office, the panel sliding shut behind him, Eleanor was left alone with the panoramic view. The city lights seemed less triumphant now, more vulnerable. She had invited a ghost into her machine, and she could only pray he would hunt the right demons. The next few weeks fell into a strange, bifurcated rhythm for Marcus. By day, he was a father. He was the man who made slightly burnt pancakes, who could braid hair with a surprising dexterity born of years of practice, who walked his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, to the school bus stop every morning. He would watch the bus pull away, his hand lingering in a wave, his eyes scanning the street for the 2 unobtrusive, dark sedans that Eleanor had promised. They were always there, parked at opposite ends of the block, silent guardians he never acknowledged. Only then would he retreat into their small, sparse apartment, the fortress he had built with anonymity, and try to sleep for a few hours. His apartment was a testament to his hidden life. The walls were bare except for Maya's vibrant, crayon-drawn masterpieces. A smiling sun with too many rays, a slightly lopsided house with a stick-figure family, a man and a girl holding hands. There were no pictures of her mother, no photos of his past life. Marcus had surgically removed his own history, believing the scar tissue was safer than the open wound. By night, he was a phantom. He would don his gray janitor's uniform, the perfect camouflage, and enter the gleaming glass and steel tower of Ethel Corporation. He would push his cart through the silent, empty hallways, the squeak of the wheels a familiar, comforting sound. He would empty trash cans, mop floors, his movements automatic, his mind already leagues away, preparing for the real work. Then, at precisely 2 a.m., he would take a service elevator to the subbasement, walk through a series of utility corridors, and take a second private elevator that required Eleanor's keycard directly to the penthouse floor. Inside his sterile, windowless office, he would shed the skin of Marcus Thorne and become Marcus Vance once more. The terminal Eleanor had provided was a weapon, and he wielded it with lethal precision. With her credentials, he had a god's-eye view of the entire corporate apparatus. He moved like a ghost through the digital architecture of Ethel, a silent predator hunting a much larger one. He started with Project Chimera. He confirmed his initial theory. It was a brilliantly designed slush fund. But it was more than that. It was a clearinghouse. Following the money out was harder than following it in. Sterling was a master of obfuscation. The funds were routed through a dizzying array of offshore accounts, from the Cayman Islands to Cyprus to shell corporations in Panama that existed only as a mailing address and a single sheet of paper in a lawyer's dusty filing cabinet. He and Eleanor developed their own rhythm. She would arrive at her office before dawn, and he would be there, waiting in his small room, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. He would present his findings in quiet, clipped tones, pointing to anomalies and dead ends. "He's using a nested doll structure," Marcus explained one morning, gesturing to a complex flowchart he had projected onto the wall. "Every time we get close to a primary account, it liquidates and transfers the funds to a new one, under a different corporate name. We're always one step behind." "Can we freeze the accounts?" Eleanor asked, her arms crossed, her expression taut. "Not without tipping our hand," Marcus said. "These are all legitimate banking institutions. We have no legal standing to request a freeze based on suspicion alone." He's insulated himself perfectly. "We can see the smoke, but we can't prove there's a fire." Their alliance remained strictly transactional, a partnership of convenience. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, the lines began to blur. She started leaving a thermos of hot, black coffee on the desk for him each morning. He, in turn, started anticipating her questions, having the relevant data already isolated and prepared for her arrival. They rarely spoke of anything beyond the investigation, but in the shared silence of the early morning hours, a quiet understanding began to grow. She saw the relentless dedication he brought to the hunt. He saw the immense pressure she was under, the weight of the corporate empire she carried on her shoulders. One evening, Marcus was working his way through Sterling's encrypted personal server logs, a task akin to picking a series of infinitely complex locks. He found a recurring data packet, sent every Friday evening to an external IP address. It was heavily encrypted, but its size was consistent, large enough to contain sensitive files. "He's leaking data," Marcus murmured to the empty room. "This has to be it." He spent 2 days trying to break the encryption, hitting one dead end after another. It was military-grade, far beyond standard corporate security. "I can't get through this," he told Eleanor, frustration lacing his voice for the first time. "It's a black box. The data goes in, gets encrypted, and is sent. The destination IP is masked through a dozen proxies. It could be going anywhere." Eleanor stared at the string of code on the screen. "OmniGuard," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Our merger partner. Their chief technology officer, Julian Croft, is ex-military intelligence. He designed encryption protocols for the Department of Defense." Sterling isn't just trying to buy the company, Marcus realized, the full scope of the betrayal snapping into focus. "He's selling our proprietary technology to our future partner. He's devaluing Ethel from the inside while simultaneously positioning OmniGuard to be the dominant force post-merger. When the deal goes through, he'll use the money he stole from Ethel to activate his proxy shares. And with Croft's help, they'll oust you and take control of the entire entity." It was a corporate coup of breathtaking audacity, and they had no concrete proof. All they had was a string of encrypted data packets and a trail of money that vanished like smoke. "There has to be a key," Marcus insisted, running a hand over his tired face. "A ledger. Something that connects Sterling to Chimera and Chimera to the payments. He's arrogant, but he's not stupid. He'll have a record somewhere. His insurance policy." "His main office is a fortress," Eleanor said. "We can't get in there. And his home is a smart house with a security system I designed myself. It's impenetrable." "Then it's not physical," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the server architecture again. "It's digital. And it's hidden somewhere no one would ever think to look." He began a new search, not for accounts or files, but for empty space. He scanned the Ethel servers for partition drives, hidden folders, encrypted containers masked as system files. For days he found nothing. The frustration mounted. He was sleeping less, eating little, the hunt consuming him. The only respite was the hour in the morning when he would walk Maya to the bus, her small hand in his, her cheerful chatter about school and friends a lifeline to the world he was trying to protect. One morning, as he was preparing to leave the tower, he saw something that made him freeze. On the public access server, the one used for company-wide memos and HR announcements, he noticed a tiny partition file. It was less than a megabyte, disguised as a corrupted temp file from a long decommissioned printer driver. It was digital dust. No one would ever look there. It was too public, too mundane. It was perfect. He tried to access it. Denied. It required a secondary password, a biometric key he didn't have. "I found it," he told Eleanor when she arrived, pointing to the file. "I think this is his ledger, his key, but it's locked down. I can't get in." Eleanor looked at the file's location. The HR server. That's clever. The one place our security protocols are the most lax, she thought for a moment. The biometrics will be tied to his personal terminal. His office, which is a fortress, Marcus finished, the familiar dead end looming before them. "A physical fortress," Eleanor corrected him, a glint in her eye he hadn't seen before. "But every system has a vulnerability. Sterling's is his ego," she tapped her chin. "He's scheduled to be in a board meeting all afternoon tomorrow, presenting the quarterly earnings. His office will be empty. But it will be locked," Marcus said. "And I can't exactly walk in there in this uniform." "You won't have to," Eleanor said, a plan clearly forming in her mind. "The lock is digital. It's tied to the building's network. And I know a man who can walk through digital walls as if they weren't there." She looked at him. Tomorrow, while he's in that meeting, you are going to perform a little unscheduled network maintenance from right here. You're going to open his door for me. I'm going in." The idea was reckless. If she were caught, her career would be over. But as Marcus looked at her, at the fierce determination on her face, he realized their alliance had changed. It was no longer just transactional. They were in this together, united against a common enemy. "It's risky," he said quietly. "The greatest risks," Eleanor replied, her eyes locked on his, "yield the greatest rewards. Get some rest, Mr. Vance. Tomorrow we go hunting the next afternoon." The air in the penthouse was thick with a tension that felt electric. Marcus sat in his cloistered office, the door open, allowing him to see the main area where Eleanor stood by the window, looking down at the city. She was dressed in a severe, dark gray suit, her posture ramrod straight, but Marcus could see the slight, repetitive tap of her finger against her arm. She was nervous. On his screen, Marcus had two windows open. One showed a live feed of the building's security cameras, focused on the corridor outside Arthur Sterling's office. The other was a direct interface with the building's central security network. He had spent the morning mapping the system, finding the backdoors and vulnerabilities left by lazy contractors and outdated software patches. It was a digital maze, but for him it was home turf. "He's in," Eleanor said, her voice tight. She was watching the live broadcast of the board meeting on a tablet. "He just started his presentation. He'll be occupied for at least the next 90 minutes. "That's our window," Marcus confirmed, his fingers poised over the keyboard. "I'm in the network. The lock on his office door is controlled by a localized server on this floor. I can create a temporary bypass loop, but it will leave a digital footprint. How long to cover the tracks? 15-20 minutes if I'm careful, which means you have about an hour, tops, from the moment I open that door." "It's more than I'll need," she said, turning from the window. Her face was a pale, determined mask. "I know what I'm looking for. A hard drive, a thumb drive, anything that could serve as a biometric key." "Eleanor," he said, using her first name for the first time, "felt strange but necessary. If security finds you, I can't help you. The bypass will be obvious to them. They'll trace it back to this floor." "They won't find me," she said with a confidence he wasn't sure she felt. "Just open the door." Marcus took a deep breath. This was the point of no return. He executed the command. On the security feed, the small LED on Sterling's door lock flickered from red to green. "The door is open. Your clock is ticking." She gave a curt nod and strode out of her office, her heels clicking with sharp, purposeful authority on the marble floor. Marcus watched her on the camera feed as she walked down the hall, her gait steady, betraying none of the immense risk she was taking. She reached Sterling's door, glanced both ways down the empty corridor, and slipped inside. The door closed behind her. Now Marcus's job began. He had to keep her safe. He looped the camera feed for that hallway, a simple 10-second clip of an empty corridor playing over and over. Anyone watching from the central security hub would see nothing out of the ordinary. He then began the delicate work of erasing his entry into the network, a painstaking process of altering log files and rewriting timestamps. Inside Sterling's office, Eleanor felt a wave of revulsion. The space was the polar opposite of her own. It was opulent, ostentatious. Mahogany desk, plush leather chairs, walls covered with photos of Sterling shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. It was the office of a man who loved the trappings of power more than power itself. She moved quickly, her actions precise. She ignored the computer on his desk. Marcus had already confirmed it was clean. She was looking for a physical object. She checked his desk drawers. Nothing but expensive pens and stationery. She ran her hands along the spines of the leather-bound books on his shelves, searching for a hidden safe. Nothing. Her eyes scanned the room again. On a small credenza was a collection of silver-framed photographs. Sterling with his wife, Sterling on a yacht, and one of Sterling standing with a young man who looked to be in his early 20s, both of them holding a large fish. His son. Eleanor remembered from his file that Sterling's son had died in a climbing accident a few years ago. She picked up the frame. It was heavier than it should have been. She turned it over. On the back, a tiny seam was visible in the plush velvet backing. Using her fingernail, she pried it open. Inside, nestled in a cutout in the frame's backing, was a small metallic object. It wasn't a thumb drive. It was a biometric fingerprint scanner, no bigger than a postage stamp, with a tiny USB-C port on its side. This was it, the key. It wouldn't store the data itself, but it would hold the unique encryption key required to unlock the file on the HR server, authenticated by his fingerprint. Her heart hammered in her chest. She slipped the device into her pocket and carefully replaced the backing on the frame, setting it back exactly where she'd found it. She was turning to leave when her gaze fell on a single piece of paper lying face down on Sterling's desk blotter, partially obscured by a financial report. It looked like a cheap printout, out of place amidst the expensive stationery. A flicker of intuition, the very human impulse she had spent her life suppressing, made her pick it up. It was a picture, a grainy, long-lens photograph of a playground. A little girl with 2 long braids was on the swings, her head thrown back in laughter. It was Maya. A chill, colder and more profound than any fear for her company, washed over Eleanor. This wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. Sterling wasn't just watching Marcus. He was watching his daughter. The date printed in the corner was from yesterday. She heard a faint chime from the hallway. The elevator. Someone was coming. Her blood ran cold. The board meeting wasn't supposed to end for another hour. In the penthouse, Marcus saw it too. An unscheduled elevator arrival on the executive floor. He checked the building's access logs. It was Sterling. "Eleanor, get out of there. Now!" He hissed into the small comms device she wore. "It's Sterling. He's coming back." The camera feed showed Sterling striding down the hall, his face a thunderous mask of fury. He must have left the meeting. Eleanor's mind raced. If she left now, he would see her. She was trapped. She looked around the office, her eyes darting for a place to hide. There was none. The office was all open space and ego. "Talk to me, Marcus. What do I do?" she whispered, her voice strained. Marcus's hands flew across the keyboard. He couldn't stop Sterling from reaching his office, but he could create a diversion. He accessed the floor's HVAC system, found the fire suppression controls. It was insane, a massive overreaction, but it was the only thing he could think of. "When I give the word, get low and head for the emergency stairwell," he commanded. "Don't come back here. Go down 2 floors and take the service elevator from there. Go." He watched the screen. Sterling's hand was reaching for his office doorknob. "Now!" Marcus yelled, and slammed his palm down on the enter key. He triggered the fire alarm for the entire executive floor. Sprinklers erupted from the ceiling, and a deafening klaxon began to blare. On the camera feed, he saw Sterling recoil from his door as water began to pour down in the hallway. In the chaos, Eleanor burst from the office, head down, and sprinted in the opposite direction, toward the stairwell, disappearing from view. Marcus killed the alarm and the sprinklers as quickly as he had started them, but the damage was done. Water was everywhere. He knew security would be there in moments. He had just enough time to wipe the final traces of his presence from the security server before he had to vanish himself. He shut down his terminal, grabbed his janitor's cart from the outer office, and fled back to the service corridors, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had saved her. She had the key, but in the process they had made a fatal error. They had shown their hand. Sterling, standing in a puddle of water outside his office, soaked and furious, now knew without a doubt that someone was onto him. He didn't know who or how, but he knew the game had changed. And Marcus knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that Sterling's next move would not be against the company. It would be aimed at the one thing Marcus Vance had left to lose. It would be aimed at Maya. The hunt had just become terrifyingly personal. The aftermath of the botched infiltration was a silent, simmering war. Sterling, of course, raised hell. He demanded a full investigation into the malfunction of the fire suppression system, his face a mask of public outrage that barely concealed a private, seething fury. He knew it wasn't an accident. The precision of the event, targeting only the executive corridor, lasting less than a minute, was too clean. It was a message, and he had sent one back with the photograph left on his desk. A photograph Eleanor hadn't told Marcus about. Not yet. She had returned to her office via the service elevators, drenched and shaken, clutching the biometric key in her pocket. She found Marcus waiting, the anxiety etched on his face. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "I'm fine," she said, her voice betraying a tremor she couldn't control. She placed the small silver device on her desk. "I got it. This is the key." He picked it up, relief washing over him. "This is it. This is everything." Then he looked at her, truly looked at her. "What is it? What else happened in there?" She hesitated. Telling him about the photograph of Maya would unleash a fear in him that could cripple their efforts. He was driven by the need to protect his daughter. Raw terror was a different, more volatile fuel. She made a calculated decision. A ruler's decision, not a partner's. To withhold the information. To shield her most valuable asset from an emotional variable she couldn't control. "Nothing," she lied. "I was almost caught. It was close." He seemed to accept it, his focus shifting back to the key in his hand. But a seed of doubt was planted. He knew her well enough by now to read the subtle tells, the slight aversion of her gaze, the forced control in her voice. She was hiding something. They worked through the night. The key was a masterpiece of engineering. Once connected to Marcus's terminal and authenticated with a fingerprint, it didn't just unlock the file. It created a one-time, secure tunnel directly to a hidden partition on Sterling's personal cloud server. And on that server, they found his life's work of treachery. It was all there. The ledger, a meticulously detailed record of every fractional cent funneled into Project Chimera. The dates, the amounts, the originating cost centers, it was a prosecutor's dream. There were encrypted communications with Julian Croft at OmniGuard, discussing the sale of Ethel's proprietary source code for their flagship security software. Aegis, there were offshore bank statements, proxy share purchase agreements, and a timeline for the corporate takeover that was set to culminate in 2 weeks, the day after the merger was finalized. And there was something else. A folder labeled Contingency. Inside were files on every member of the Ethel board. Blackmail, financial indiscretions, personal scandals, hidden debts. Sterling had a leash on every single one of them. But the thickest file, the one with the most recent and disturbing entries, was on Marcus Vance. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs as he read it. Sterling had never stopped watching him. He had detailed records of his life as Marcus Thorne. His address, his daily routine, and Maya's. Her school schedule, her ballet classes, her favorite park. The file was a stalker's diary. It included the accident report from his wife's death, with certain passages highlighted. The name of the drunk driver, his known associates. It was Sterling's way of reminding Marcus what he was capable of. "He knows everything?" Marcus whispered, a cold dread seeping into his bones. "He's been playing with me." "This is the proof we need," Eleanor said, her voice steely, though her eyes were fixed on the file with a horrified intensity. "This is more than enough to go to the authorities. To destroy him. And what happens when we do?" Marcus countered, his voice rising. "We hand this to the police, Sterling gets arrested, and his associates, the kind of men who arrange car accidents, get a call. What do you think happens to Maya then? He's made her his failsafe, his hostage. If he goes down, he'll take my daughter with him." The terrible truth of their situation settled upon them. They had the evidence to win the war, but the cost of using it was impossibly high. They were trapped. The photograph of Maya that Eleanor had seen now burned in her mind. Her decision to withhold it had been a grave miscalculation. She had tried to manage his emotions, and in doing so had disrespected the very core of his motivation. She had treated him as an asset, not a partner, not a father. "There was something else," she said, her voice quiet with shame. In his office, on his desk, he had a photograph of Maya at the playground. It was taken yesterday. Marcus turned to her, and the look in his eyes was one of profound betrayal. It was not anger. It was a cold, deep, and wounding disappointment. "And you didn't tell me?" "I thought it would," she began, but the words died on her lips. She had no excuse. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." The apology, a word she rarely used, hung in the air. Marcus said nothing. He simply turned back to the screen, his face a stone mask. The trust they had carefully, silently built over the past weeks had been fractured. He pulled up the security details report from the previous day. Everything was normal. No suspicious individuals, no incidents. Sterling's people were professionals. They were ghosts just like his own protectors. The weight of his failure, the failure to keep his new life separate, to keep the violence of his past from touching his daughter, crashed down on him. He had run for 7 years, and it hadn't been far enough. The monster was no longer at the door. It was looking in his daughter's window. His fear, cold and sharp, began to curdle into something else. A slow-burning, focused rage. He had spent 7 years hiding. He was done hiding. "He wants to make this personal," Marcus said, his voice dangerously low. "Fine. Let's make it personal." He started to type, his movements no longer just precise but aggressive. "We can't go to the police, so we're going to force his hand. We're going to take away his options, one by one, until all he has left is to come at us directly. On our terms." "What are you doing?" Eleanor asked, watching as he navigated the complex web of Sterling's offshore accounts. "He built a house of cards," Marcus said, his eyes glowing with a feverish intensity in the monitor's light. "I'm going to pull out the foundation." He couldn't freeze the accounts, but with the information from the ledger, he could do something far more damaging. He began to initiate a series of microtransfers, not out of the accounts, but between them. He sent a few dollars from the Cyprus account to the one in Panama, a few more from the Caymans to a shell corp in Delaware. They were tiny, meaningless transactions, but they were enough to trigger the bank's automated fraud detection algorithms. He was using the system against itself. "The banks will flag this as suspicious activity," he explained, not taking his eyes off the screen. "They'll place a temporary hold on the accounts pending review. It might only be for 48 hours, but it will be enough. When Sterling tries to access his capital to make his proxy purchase, he's going to find his funds are frozen." It was brilliant, a non-violent digital attack that would corner Sterling completely. "He'll know it was us," Eleanor stated. "I want him to know," Marcus snarled. "I want him to get angry. I want him to get sloppy. When he finds out his money is gone and his plan is ruined, he's not going to sit back and call his lawyer. He's going to come for the only thing he thinks he can use against me." "Maya," Eleanor breathed, the full, terrifying scope of his plan becoming clear. "Yes," Marcus said, finally looking at her. The weariness was gone, replaced by a chilling resolve. "He's going to try and take my daughter, and we are going to be waiting for him." He was turning his own child into bait. It was the most terrible choice a father could make. But as he looked at the files, at the cold, clinical surveillance of his little girl, he knew it was the only choice he had left. He couldn't run any further. The only way out was through. The next 36 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He had set his trap, and now all he could do was wait for the jaws to spring. The tension was a living thing, a third presence in the penthouse office, coiling in the silence between him and Eleanor. The fracture in their trust remained, a hairline crack in a sheet of glass, invisible from a distance but threatening to shatter everything under the slightest pressure. He did not go home. He couldn't face Maya, couldn't look into her innocent eyes knowing the danger he was deliberately drawing toward her. He stayed in his windowless room, monitoring Sterling's network activity, watching the digital ripples of his attack spread. As he predicted, one by one, the offshore accounts were flagged and frozen. The flow of Sterling's stolen capital seized up. He was watching a man's empire crumble in real time. Eleanor, for her part, threw herself into arranging the other side of the trap. She was on the phone constantly, speaking in low, coded language to the head of the private security firm. The team watching Maya was tripled. They weren't just guardians now. They were a net. Every approach to the school, the park, their apartment building was mapped and covered. An extraction team was on standby, ready to move Maya to a secure, undisclosed location the moment Marcus gave the word. Eleanor found herself watching him, studying the rigid set of his shoulders, the unblinking focus in his eyes. She had seen this kind of resolve before in board members during a hostile takeover in rival CEOs. But this was different. This wasn't about money or power. It was primal, the protective fury of a father. She finally understood the depth of what he had sacrificed to keep his daughter safe, and the terrible cost of his decision to stop running. The guilt over her lie about the photograph was a sharp, persistent ache. "Marcus," she said, breaking a long silence. He didn't look up from his screen. "What you're doing, the risk you're taking with your daughter, it's the only way." He cut her off, his voice flat. "He left me no other move. He put her on the board. I didn't." "I know," she said softly. "I should have told you about the picture immediately. My instinct was to control the data, to manage the variable. That variable was your heart, and I had no right. It won't happen again." He finally looked at her. He saw no corporate maneuvering in her eyes, no calculated apology. He saw genuine regret. He gave a single, slow nod. The crack in the glass didn't vanish, but it ceased to spread. They didn't have time for anything more. The alert came just after dawn on the second day. Sterling's network activity, which had been frantic and chaotic for hours, suddenly went silent. Then, a single, encrypted peer-to-peer call was placed from a burner phone. Marcus intercepted it, but the encryption was too strong to break in real time. He could only trace the destination. A known associate of the man who had been behind the wheel of the car that killed his wife. "He's made the call," Marcus said, his voice grim. "It's happening. Today." He called the head of Maya's security detail. "He's coming. Full alert. No one gets within 100 feet of her. No one. If you have to create a scene, you do it. But she does not leave your sight." The plan was for Maya to follow her normal routine. Any deviation would signal to Sterling that they were aware. Marcus had to sit in that sterile room, miles away, and watch his daughter walk into the crosshairs of a killer. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He pulled up the live feeds from the security team. They were disguised as city workers, mothers with strollers, men reading newspapers on park benches. He watched as Maya, a small figure in a bright pink coat, emerged from their apartment building, holding her nanny's hand. He had hired the nanny, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable, a month ago on Eleanor's recommendation. She was, of course, a highly trained ex-Mossad agent. They walked toward the school. Marcus's eyes darted across the screen, scanning every face in the crowd, every car that passed. His heart was a cold, heavy stone in his chest. The first move came half a block from the school. A panel van, painted with the logo of a plumbing company, suddenly swerved to the curb, blocking their path. Two men got out. They were big, dressed in work overalls, and they moved with a purpose that had nothing to do with plumbing. The security team converged instantly. The mother with the stroller produced a taser. The man reading a newspaper was suddenly on his feet, his hand inside his jacket. Mrs. Gable spun around, placing herself between Maya and the men, her body tensed. But it was a feint. As all eyes were on the van, a second man, smaller, nondescript, emerged from the entrance of the subway station behind them. He moved quickly toward Maya. This was the real threat. "Behind you!" Marcus yelled uselessly at the screen. But the team was good. One of the agents, disguised as a bike messenger, intercepted the man, tackling him to the ground in a motion that looked like a clumsy accident to the untrained eye. The two men from the van, seeing the plan had failed, jumped back in their vehicle and sped away. The entire event lasted less than 10 seconds. Maya, wide-eyed and confused, was quickly and calmly hustled into the school by Mrs. Gable. She was safe. Marcus slumped in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead. It was a failed attempt, but it confirmed everything. Sterling was desperate, and he was coming directly at Maya. "He'll try again," Eleanor said, her voice strained. She had watched the whole thing over his shoulder, her hand gripping the back of his chair. "I know," Marcus said, "but not at the school. Security is too high now. He'll wait. He'll try to get her in transit." On the way home, he looked at the map, his mind working furiously. The park. She goes to the park with Mrs. Gable after school every Tuesday. It's more open, harder to secure. "We can pull her out," Eleanor insisted. "Take her to the safe house right now." "No," Marcus said, his resolve hardening. "If we do that, he'll know his leverage is gone. He'll go to ground. He'll disappear with his blackmail files, and we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. We have to end this. Today. At the park." He was laying a second trap, a more dangerous one. He was using his daughter as the cheese, and he was gambling her life on the competence of Eleanor's security team and the predictability of a desperate man. He spent the next few hours with Eleanor and the head of security, a calm, ex-Special Forces commander named Gray, planning the operation for the park. They went over satellite images, entry points, fields of fire. Marcus's past life, the part of him that understood tactics and risk assessment, came flooding back. He pointed out blind spots, potential sniper positions in the surrounding buildings, sewer access points. He was no longer just a forensic accountant, he was a strategist. Eleanor watched him, a sense of awe mixing with her fear. She had hired a janitor and uncovered an investigator. Now, she was seeing the warrior beneath it all, a man forged by loss into something unbreakable. Her respect for him deepened into something more, a profound and powerful connection she had never felt with anyone. As the afternoon approached, the final pieces were moved into place. The park was saturated with undercover agents. Gray and his command team were in a van half a block away, watching dozens of hidden camera feeds. Marcus and Eleanor were in the penthouse, their own screens showing the same feeds. Then they saw her. Mrs. Gable and Maya walked into the park, hand in hand. Maya ran for the swings, her laughter carrying faintly through the audio feeds. It was a perfect, peaceful autumn afternoon, a scene of profound innocence staged in the center of a battlefield. "All teams are in position," Gray's voice crackled over the comms. "We are a go. Waiting for contact." Marcus leaned forward, his knuckles white, his eyes locked on the tiny figure of his daughter pumping her legs on the swing. For 7 years, his entire world had been reduced to protecting that one small, bright life. Now, he had to offer her up to the darkness in order to save her from it. The impossible choice. "Stay with her," he whispered to the screen, to the unseen guardians surrounding his child. Just stay with her. The park was a mosaic of controlled chaos. To any casual observer, it was just another Tuesday afternoon. Children shrieked with laughter on the slides. Dog walkers ambled along the paths. Couples shared benches under the golden autumn leaves. But Marcus, his eyes darting between a dozen different camera angles, saw the truth. He saw the jogger whose pace never changed, circling the perimeter. He saw the gardener trimming hedges that didn't need trimming, his eyes constantly scanning the rooftops. He saw the intricate, invisible web of protection they had woven around his daughter. Maya was on the swings, her pink coat a bright beacon. Mrs. Gable stood nearby, pushing her gently, her posture relaxed but her head on a constant, subtle swivel. Every minute that ticked by was an eternity. Marcus's breath was a tight knot in his chest. He felt Eleanor's hand on his shoulder, a small, steady pressure. It was a gesture of solidarity that went beyond their professional alliance. In that moment, they were simply two people, bound by a shared, terrifying purpose. "We have a visual," Gray's voice said, calm and clipped. "Black SUV, corner of 5th and Elm. 3 occupants. They're watching." Marcus zoomed in on the feed. The vehicle was nondescript, but the men inside were not. They were the same type as the ones from the van. Hired muscle. But Sterling wasn't with them. "This is another feint," Marcus said, his mind racing. "He's testing the perimeter, trying to draw our attention. Or he's not coming himself," Eleanor suggested. "He's subcontracting the risk." "No," Marcus insisted. "His money is frozen. His plan is in ruins. He's lost control. An egomaniac like Sterling? He'll want to be here. He needs to see it, to feel the power of taking the one thing I have left. He's not in the car. So where is he?" Marcus switched camera views, his eyes scanning not the park itself, but its surroundings. The apartment buildings, the storefronts, the delivery trucks. Where would be the one place you could observe without being seen? The one place that offered a clear line of sight and a quick escape. His eyes landed on an old, disused hot dog vendor's cart at the edge of the park, tucked near a service entrance. It had been there all day, a piece of urban furniture no one would notice. But one of the camera angles gave him a glimpse of the man inside. He wore a floppy hat and sunglasses, but the sharp, arrogant line of his jaw was unmistakable. "There," Marcus breathed, pointing. "The hot dog cart. That's him. That's Sterling. Gray, do you have eyes on the vendor cart?" Eleanor commanded into her comms unit. "Affirmative," Gray replied. "We see him. He's alone. Should we move in?" "No, stand by," Marcus cut in. "He's the command. The men in the SUV are the muscle. He'll give them the signal and they'll move on Maya. That's when we take them." All of them. They watched, the silence in the penthouse deafening. On the screen, Sterling lifted a pair of binoculars, focusing them on the playground. On Maya. A cold, predatory rage surged through Marcus. He wanted nothing more than to be there himself, to tear the man apart with his bare hands. Then, Sterling lowered the binoculars and reached for something inside the cart. "He's making his move," Gray said. "SUV is starting to roll." The black vehicle pulled slowly away from the curb, turning into the park's service road, heading directly for the playground. "All teams, prepare to engage on my mark," Gray commanded. But Marcus saw something else. Sterling wasn't reaching for a radio. In his hand was not a phone, but a small, dark object with an antenna. A detonator. "It's a bomb," Marcus screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. "Gray, it's not a kidnapping. It's a bomb. The cart. The whole damn cart is a bomb." Sterling's plan was never to take Maya. It was to eliminate the problem. All of them. Marcus's daughter, the security team, any witnesses. A public, chaotic act of terror that would be blamed on anyone but him. He would walk away in the confusion, his revenge complete. "Evacuate! Get her out of there now!" Eleanor yelled. On the ground, everything happened in a blur. Gray's voice, now roaring with urgency, gave the command. The agents broke cover, no longer pretending. The jogger and the gardener sprinted toward the playground. Mrs. Gable snatched Maya off the swing, tucking her under one arm like a football and running faster than Marcus had ever seen a human being run. Sterling saw it. He saw the agents converging, saw his plan unraveling in seconds. His face, visible on the zoomed-in camera, twisted into a mask of pure hatred. He raised the detonator. "No!" Marcus bellowed at the screen. There was a single, sharp crack. Not an explosion. A gunshot. From a rooftop across the street, one of Gray's snipers had taken the shot. The detonator flew from Sterling's hand, clattering harmlessly onto the pavement. Sterling staggered back, clutching his shoulder, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. The men in the SUV, seeing their leader was down, slammed the vehicle into reverse. But it was too late. Two of Gray's own vehicles materialized, blocking them in. Agents swarmed the SUV, weapons drawn. It was over. In the penthouse, Marcus was on his feet, his hands braced on the desk, his body trembling with the violent aftershocks of adrenaline and terror. He watched the feeds as Mrs. Gable handed a crying, terrified Maya over to one of the agents, who bundled her into an armored car that sped away, headed for the safe house. She was safe. She was alive. He collapsed back into his chair, the strength leaving his limbs. He buried his face in his hands, and a sound escaped him. A ragged, wrenching sob of relief that was 7 years in the making. Eleanor stood behind him, her hand resting on his shaking shoulder. She didn't speak. There were no words for this. She simply stood with him, a silent partner in his pain and his victory. The ghost in her machine had not only hunted the demons. He had faced down the devil himself and saved the most important thing in his world. And in saving his world, he had saved hers, too. The call came from Gray 20 minutes later. "We have Sterling in custody. He's wounded but stable. His men are secured. The bomb squad is disarming the device now." It was a significant explosive military-grade C4. The casualty count would have been high. He paused. "Your daughter is secure at the designated location. She's asking for her father." Marcus took a deep, shuddering breath. "I'm on my way." He stood up, his legs still unsteady. He looked at Eleanor, and the chasm of their different worlds, the janitor and the CEO, the grieving father and the Ice Queen, seemed to vanish. In its place was a bond forged in fire, a deep, unspoken understanding. "Go," she said, her voice soft. "Be with your daughter." "What about the ledger?" he asked, his mind slowly returning to the corporate battle that had started it all. "The board." "Leave that to me," she said, and for the first time, he saw a faint, genuine smile touch her lips, transformed her face. "I believe I have a board meeting to call. It's time to take out the trash." He nodded, turned, and walked toward the elevator, leaving the penthouse, the terminal, and Marcus Vance behind. For now, he was just a father going to his child. The boardroom at Ethel Corporation had always been a cold place, a theater of calculated power plays and veiled aggression. But the emergency meeting Eleanor called that evening had a different kind of chill. It was the unnerving silence of a graveyard. The remaining members of the board sat around the long, polished table, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and dawning comprehension. Arthur Sterling's chair was conspicuously empty. Eleanor stood at the head of the table, not in her usual place, but standing before a large presentation screen. She looked out at the faces of the men and women she had worked with for years, men and women she now knew Sterling had controlled through blackmail and intimidation. "Good evening," she began, her voice calm and resonant, filling the silent room. "I'm sure you are all wondering why you were summoned here at such an unusual hour, and I'm sure you've all heard the preliminary, chaotic reports about an incident involving our CFO, Arthur Sterling." She let the words hang in the air. Murmurs rippled through the room. "The rumors are true," she continued, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Mr. Sterling was taken into custody by federal agents this afternoon. But the reason is something none of the news reports have yet. And that is what I am here to share with you." With a click of a remote, the screen behind her came to life. It didn't show charts or profit margins. It showed the Project Chimera ledger. Line after line of illicit transactions, a meticulous record of a $24 million theft. Gasps and shocked whispers filled the room. "For the past 3 years," Eleanor explained, her voice a whip-crack of authority, "Mr. Sterling has been systematically embezzling funds from this company. He created a ghost project and bled this corporation, your corporation, to the tune of $8 million a year." She clicked the remote again. The screen changed to show the encrypted communications with Julian Croft at OmniGuard. "He wasn't just stealing our money. He was selling our future. He has been leaking the source code for our most valuable asset, the Aegis security protocol, to our merger partner. His plan was to devalue us, trigger the merger, and then use our own stolen money to stage a hostile takeover from the inside." The board was in an uproar. Shouts of disbelief and anger erupted. But Eleanor wasn't finished. "He insulated himself with layers of shell corporations and offshore accounts," she said, her voice rising above the din, "and he ensured your silence with this." The screen changed one last time. It cycled through the contingency files, a list of names, each board member present. Next to each name, a single, damning keyword: tax evasion, extramarital affair Zurich. Insider Trading, 1998. A dead, horrified silence fell over the room. The blood drained from their faces. They were exposed, stripped bare. Arthur Sterling did not believe in loyalty, Eleanor said, her voice now low and dangerous. He believed in leverage. He held your secrets, and he used them to guarantee your compliance while he hollowed out this company. But his leverage is gone. The original files have been turned over to the authorities as part of a sealed deal. As of this moment, your secrets are safe on one condition: your unanimous and immediate vote to approve my new corporate restructuring plan. She had them. They were Sterling's victims as much as she was, and she was offering them not a threat, but an escape, a way out. The plan is simple, she said, her voice regaining its CEO's composure. We are terminating the merger with OmniGuard, effective immediately. We will be pursuing legal action against them and Julian Croft for corporate espionage. And we will be creating a new division at Ethel, an internal audit and risk management division, with unprecedented authority to investigate any and all aspects of our operations. It will be an independent entity, reporting only to me. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. This division will ensure that no one can ever hold this company hostage from the inside again. It will be our shield, our aegis. She looked around the table, meeting each of their gazes. She saw fear, but also a dawning flicker of respect, of relief. I need a motion to approve, she said. An older board member, a man Sterling had been blackmailing for a decade, slowly raised his hand. I so move. Second, Eleanor asked. A woman across the table, her face pale but resolute, raised hers. Seconded. All in favor. Every hand in the room went up. It was a silent, unanimous surrender, and a vote of absolute confidence. The old order was broken. A new one had begun. Later that night, Eleanor stood alone in her penthouse office, looking out at the city lights. Her company was secure. The threat was neutralized. She had won. But the victory felt hollow. Her gaze drifted to the small, empty room that had been Marcus's office. The man who had made it all possible was gone. He had upheld his end of the bargain. Now she had to uphold hers, to help him and his daughter disappear, forever. The thought left a surprising and profound ache in her chest. She had found the most competent, trustworthy, and courageous man she had ever known, only to lose him. She picked up her phone and made a call. It's me, she said. Begin the preparations for the Vance relocation protocol. Complete anonymity. No budget limitations. Give him whatever he needs to build a new life. She hung up and leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the window. She had her kingdom back, more secure than ever. But her castle felt empty. The queen was, once again, alone on her throne. For the first time in a very long time, she wasn't sure that was what she wanted anymore. 6 months later, the cherry blossoms were in full bloom, their delicate pink and white petals drifting on the warm spring breeze. A small park in a quiet, sun-drenched coastal town thousands of miles from the steel and glass canyons of her city was the last place Eleanor Vance ever expected to find herself on a Saturday afternoon. Yet there she was, sitting on a bench, dressed not in a power suit, but in simple jeans and a soft cashmere sweater. A short distance away, a little girl with 2 long braids squealed with laughter as she chased a soccer ball. Her father, dressed in a plain t-shirt and cargo shorts, laughed with her. His face relaxed and free of the shadows that had haunted him. He looked younger, lighter. He looked happy. Marcus, or Mark Peterson, as he was now known, glanced over and saw Eleanor watching. He smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes, and waved her over. After Sterling's arrest, Marcus had done exactly as he'd said he would. He had taken his daughter and disappeared. Eleanor had provided the resources the best identity specialists' money could buy. They had given him a new name, a new history, and a new home in this peaceful, anonymous town. He was now the owner of a small but successful cybersecurity consulting firm that he ran from his home office, advising local businesses. It was quiet work. It was safe. Eleanor had not expected to hear from him again. She had respected his need to vanish. But a month ago, a simple and signed postcard had arrived at her office. It showed a picture of a lighthouse from this town. There was no message, just a picture, a quiet invitation. And to her own profound surprise, she had come. She walked over to where he and Maya were playing. Maya stopped, looking up at her with bright, curious eyes. "Maya, you remember Ms. Vance, don't you?" Marcus said, ruffling his daughter's hair. "The lady from the tall building," Maya said with the simple logic of a child. She gave Eleanor a shy smile. "Hi." "Hello, Maya," Eleanor said, her own smile feeling surprisingly natural. "It's good to see you. Can we get ice cream, Daddy?" Maya asked, tugging on his hand. "Please." "Of course we can," Marcus laughed. He looked at Eleanor. "Join us." They walked to a small ice cream shop on the town square, Maya skipping between them, occasionally grabbing both of their hands. For a few moments, they looked like any other family on a sunny afternoon. The feeling was strange and warm, and it settled in Eleanor's chest in a way that board meetings and stock prices never could. They sat at a small outdoor table, Maya happily devouring a chocolate cone. "Ethel is doing well," Marcus said, making conversation. "I saw your stock price hit an all-time high last week. The new security division is a success," Eleanor confirmed. "It's become our biggest selling point. Absolute integrity. Complete transparency. Turns out, trust is a marketable commodity." She looked at him. "It's missing its director, though. The position is still open." It was a question. A quiet offer she already knew the answer to. He shook his head, a gentle smile on his face. "My consulting business is doing just fine. The biggest crisis I had last week was a bakery that got a ransomware virus. I think I'll stick with that." His eyes drifted to Maya. "This is better." "It is," she agreed softly. They fell into a comfortable silence, watching Maya try to get the last drops of melted ice cream from her cone. The frantic, life-or-death tension that had defined their relationship felt like a lifetime ago. "Thank you, Eleanor," Marcus said, his voice serious. He finally met her gaze, and she saw a deep, profound gratitude in his eyes. "For everything. For keeping your word. For giving us this." "You earned it, Marcus," she replied. "You saved my company. You saved—" A lot more than that. She had changed in the last 6 months. Her leadership style was still demanding, but it was no longer cold. She listened more. She trusted her team. She had learned the value of the human element, the lesson he had taught her without ever intending to. She was no longer just a ruler. She was becoming a leader. Maya finished her cone and leaned her sleepy head against her father's arm. "Can we go home, Daddy? I'm tired." "Sure, Munchkin," he said, stroking her hair. He looked at Eleanor. "We should go." "Of course," she said, a familiar pang of loneliness hitting her. This was their life, not hers. She was just a visitor. They stood up. As they were about to part ways, Marcus hesitated. "Are you in town for the weekend?" "Yes," she said. "My flight back is on Monday morning." I make some pretty good pancakes," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "They're not burnt anymore. Mostly. Maya and I were thinking of having some for breakfast tomorrow. There's plenty to share." It was another quiet invitation. Not to talk about business or danger or the past, but an invitation into their new life. An invitation to a future. Eleanor Vance, the CEO who trusted only data, who saw emotion as a liability, consulted the only variable that now mattered. She looked at the hopeful, open face of the man who had shown her what true strength was, and at the sleepy, innocent face of the little girl he would do anything to protect. And for the first time she made a decision based not on logic but on hope. "I'd like that very much," she said, and the smile she gave him was as bright and as warm as the spring sunshine. Some fortresses are built to keep the world out, but sometimes the strongest people are those who finally learn to leave the door unlocked. What does it truly mean to be secure? Is it about building walls so high no one can get in? Or is it about finding the one person you're willing to let past your defenses? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And for more stories that explore the strength found in unexpected places, don't forget to like and subscribe.